What's going on, fantasy football owners? Finally, a long time coming, but this is the 2012 season preview for the Fantasy Football Stock Report. As you know, I'm bringing my show from Blog Talk Radio to YouTube. I'm just going to go to by position now because I have to do it in these 15-minute segments I just recently found out. So we're going to start right away with quarterbacks in this first segment. I'm going to give you some that I like and some that I kind of maybe want to stray away from in drafts or kind of lower expectations than what the experts have. So let's start off with some guys that I like. One guy that's really kind of lower, like from what I've used, this year I got the Sports Illustrated Fantasy Football Magazine. I get different ones every year. Last year I think I got like Lindy's or something like that, or Athlon, something like that. I get different ones each year. That's how I compare. I don't use the same one all the time. They kind of have this guy that I first like is kind of a tier 3 guy. I like him as more of a lower tier 2, and that's Jay Cutler out of Chicago. Now, I know what you guys are going to say. He hasn't exactly screamed, ooh, fantasy stud over the last couple years, or even that of a fantasy backup, really. He hasn't really been a great option for your fantasy teams, and we know this because there's a couple reasons. Obviously, all the times he's been knocked on his butt. But that's mostly not Cutler's fault. That was just a poor offensive line play. The other big issue with Cutler was his interceptions. But he has done a better job with those over the past couple years. He only had 7 interceptions all of last year. Plus, the Bears added more weapons in the offseason. He's now reunited with Brandon Marshall, who's one of his favorite targets and was in Denver. And now have Michael Bush in the backfield. You certainly don't want to draft Cutler really as being your starter guy just yet. But if the rapport is still there with these guys he's going to work with, especially with a guy like Brandon Marshall, I think Cutler's certainly worth a look as a number 2 or a number 3 guy with a little bit of upside if he develops that rapport with his receiving core. Another guy that I like, and again, this is a rookie, and really rookies and I really haven't had a big rapport over the years. But I think this one's certainly going to be a player that'll work out for you. SI kind of has him as a tier 4 guy. I see him as more of a number 2, number 3, and that's Robert Griffin III out of Washington. Now look, this one I can certainly agree with when it comes to rookies. I think Griffin is going to outproduce Andrew Luck in fantasy this season. I think certainly that's something that I can agree with that all the experts are tending to say. Griffin's going to get more points than Vic and have more opportunity. Well, the reasoning is simple behind that. It's because Griffin is kind of this dual threat talent. He can run, he can pass, he can do all these other things, kind of like a Michael Vick kind of a comparison thrown into one. And don't get me wrong, Luck's still going to put up decent stats because, the Colts are going to be a team that they're going to be, trailing a lot in games, and he's probably put up a lot of passing yardage. So that'll still help you there. But overall, if you're looking for overall consistency, I like Griffin a lot more than Luck. What matters in fantasy football is it's all about point production. And you want to have that consistent point basis. Even if Griffin might not be your starter every week, and you might not want to rely on him on that being right away. But if he has a right matchup for you, there might certainly be times that Griffin's going to pay dividends for you. So you're going to want that someone who's going to put up consistent numbers week after week. And I think likely that's going to be the case with Griffin. He's got weapons to throw to in Santana Moss. They added Garcon in the offseason. He's got Cooley at tight end and Fred Davis. These guys are going to be immensely helped as well by Griffin's production. So if he falls to you in your draft, if he's there, if he's available, I think certainly he's a strong number. I think he's definitely, you could have him as your potential backup if you get a strong number 1 quarterback. You certainly want to get that. I don't think you want to be, I don't think he's going to put up Cam Newton-like numbers right away as a comparison. But I think he'll certainly put up decent numbers. Certainly can be a backup guy for you. I have him as a number 3 guy, but major upside for Robert Griffin III. I think he's going to have a big impact right away in Washington. I mean, they certainly didn't move up in the draft, the number 2 pick to get him. Well, that and St. Louis didn't need a quarterback. But I think certainly potential is there for a big rookie season and many more to come from Robert Griffin III, and certainly from Andrew Luck as well. But I think at least for this season, and who knows how much, how will they progress over their careers in terms of on the field and fantasy, But for this season, I think Griffin's the guy. You want to have a, if you're torn between the two, go with Robert Griffin III. I think he's going to be a solid backup option for you. One more guy that I like for sure, and I drafted this guy to be my backup quarterback because I picked first overall in my draft, and I had the benefit of that. And a lot of people would say, well, why wouldn't you go running back? Why wouldn't you go wide receiver? If you guys have not noticed a trend in fantasy football lately, is that this has become a passing league, and quarterbacks and wide receivers, the teams that really have those solid set positions, usually go on to win fantasy championships. That was the case with me last year when I won in 2010. Last year it was kind of tough for me because I didn't have rock solid receivers, and my quarterback was Matt Shaw, which I'll talk about a little bit more later on in this segment. But this year I got the benefit of picking number one in my CBS league, and I got Aaron Rodgers first because to me I think that was a no-brainer because you got to have that rock solid number one. But this guy I'm talking about next I think is a pretty solid number two guy that you can rely on, and that's Andy Dalton of Cincinnati. I mean, come on. Last year the guy took the Bengals to the playoffs as a rook. I don't know what the numbers are. I'm not sure on the stats. But there's not a lot of quarterbacks that can say in this league that they took their team to the playoffs in their rookie season. That's pretty huge in and of itself, no matter what the numbers say. But also, he's got weapons. He's got talented weapons around him to throw to, and these guys are just going to get better. Guys like Jermaine Gresham, guys like A.J. Green, who was also a rook last year. These guys are just going to get better and better, as Dalton develops, So, yeah, and you think of it this way, I don't know how your drafts compare or how your draft style works, but to me, I got Dalton in round 8 or 9, which really isn't that bad for waiting for a backup quarterback. Last year, I kind of made the big mistake. I drafted Eli Manning to be my backup when he's more of a number one guy. If you want a backup, you don't really want to draft a number one guy because then you'll hardly play him behind your number one. So, from this year now on out, Eli's now more of a number one guy. Dalton is a solid number two. He is a steal if he falls to you that far in your draft, obviously. He can only get better the second time around. He's got that year under his belt of experience. Like I talked about the weapons, Gresham, great. Also, he's got Jordan Shipley. I know he's coming off that ACL tear, but he certainly is another young talent that can only get better if he's healthy. That certainly helps Dalton as well. And they stocked up on receivers in the draft. They got this guy out of Rutgers, Mohamed Sanu, who I have seen not personally play, but on TV play. And let me tell you, he had pretty good play too in college. So with all this young talent around him and these guys for Dalton, I think he can only get better. I think his numbers will certainly go up. To me, he's a pretty rock solid number two if he has the right matchup. You might want to start him. I might not start him a whole lot in my position because I have Rodgers. Certainly, I'm going to start Dalton on Aaron's bye week. But maybe even with the right matchup, who knows? He's certainly going to be there as a solid number two. Maybe he sneaks into that number one discussion if he starts developing a strong rapport. He's certainly got upside. Other deep sleepers that I like at quarterback include Matt Flynn of Seattle. I think he's going to end up getting the starting job there. Don't get me wrong, there's still Tavares Jackson and Russell Wilson in the mix, and who knows how that's going to shake out. But Flynn has looked very strong of late, and I mean we can't base a lot off one game. But last year he had that great outing against Detroit in Week 17 when he was with Green Bay. But things are looking pretty good there, so maybe a deep number two, number three chance there. Ryan Tannehill in Miami also. And again, kind of another messy quarterback situation. You got Matt Moore there still, and David Garrard. Who knows what's going to happen there? But Tannehill put up decent stats, in fact, very good stats in his first outing in the preseason. You can't base a whole lot on that, but they're saying that chances are that Tannehill may start the next preseason game for the Dolphins. So keep an eye on that situation. But if Tannehill does turn out to be the starter, he could be a decent backup option for you. And real kind of deep long shot is Christian Ponder of Minnesota. He kind of came on late last season and put up some respectable fantasy numbers, number two, number three kind of stats. I think he kind of falls in that same tier this year. But again, Minnesota, kind of a low-tier team. Just kind of temporary expectations on him. He's kind of a deep sleeper guy. If he starts developing with those receivers like Percy Harvin and the like, who knows what can happen with from there. Guys that have kind of fallen a bit for me, guys that I kind of want to stay away from a bit, and I know I'm going to get a lot of boo-hoos from Atlanta people out there, because you're going to see a lot of Atlanta people on these downer lists, unfortunately, just because of the way I've seen them play. Matt Ryan is on the downfall for me. SI says tier 2. I have him more as a tier 3. Look, their offense is a mess in more ways than one. And Ryan's the young guy on this team, but they have a lot of veterans like Michael Turner, like Tony Gonzalez. Turner's probably going to get leapfrogged soon by Jacquizz Rodgers. Gonzalez isn't what he once was. You get the hint. And Julio Jones, I mean, yeah, he's coming on, but I don't buy into that hype. And if you really also haven't noticed, Atlanta really only tends to play well when they're indoors. I don't know if you guys have noticed. When they play better at home or in a dome or whatever, indoors, they usually tend to do pretty well. Outside of that, they have tended to struggle. That's why I've always seen Ryan as a major, major fantasy risk. I beg you right now, please do not draft Matt Ryan to be your starter. You're not going to get consistent production out of him. Don't make a mistake that I made. I drafted him my backup, but even then when I started him, he gave me hardly anything. Do not draft him to be your starter. Maybe a number 2 with upside, but really that's it, or maybe even not the upside part, because, I mean, what are you getting? You're only going to start him a weeks where he's at home or indoors. So just really be careful with Matt Ryan if you decide to take the chance, but I wouldn't if that's just me. And like I mentioned earlier, the other guy that's on my downfall is Matt Schaub of Houston. I have him kind of tier 3, tier 4, and don't get me wrong, I've had him as a starter for 2 seasons, and he's done fairly well, but the problem has been a couple things. The big thing is injuries. His season got cut short last year because of that foot injury, and his number 1 receiving target, Andre Johnson, had issues with both hamstrings last year. And they barely threw the ball because they don't have that much talent behind Andre Johnson. That's the problem. The running backs lead the way with Arian Foster and Ben Tate. So with no weapons, Schaub's numbers take a big hit. I can't really say anymore that Schaub is a number 1 guy like he probably could have been or was close to like last season or a couple seasons ago. He's really not that option anymore. If he can stay healthy, I think he certainly can be a maybe number 2, number 3 guy for you if he can stay healthy and play a full season again. That's just the big issue with Schaub, though. So that's the way I see him. That's really all I think he can get. Certainly got a good offense there in Houston, but the question is, how often are they going to throw the ball, and can Schaub stay healthy? Other guys that I'm going to try to avoid, and I don't think you guys should recommend, is either starters or guys you just should leave off altogether. Sam Bradford of St. Louis. The Rams are a mess. Come on, you're getting beat by the Colts 38-3 in preseason. I know that's preseason, but still, the Rams are a mess. Really, the only solid option there in the offense is all of Steven Jackson. So that's kind of a big, if you want to take a chance on him. Bradford's injury concerns, production, a lot of red flags there. Any Arizona quarterback, I don't like Kevin Cobb. I don't like John Skelton. Skelton may beat out Cobb for the job anyway, but he hasn't shown us anything fantasy-wise. I'd stay away from that situation entirely. And I would stay away from Matt Hasselbeck in Tennessee. I really have bought into the hype lately that Jake Locker is going to be the Titans starter at the end of the season. I think he's the more safe fantasy play. If you want to take a chance on Locker, I'd say maybe a number 2, number 3 with a little bit of upside. If he starts developing the rapport with the receivers like Kenny Britt, like Nate Washington, like these guys that have been there, these mainstays, even Jared Cook, the tight end, you certainly want to take a chance there. All right, guys, that's the quarterbacks that I like and don't like heading into the season. Stay tuned to my channel for my other videos debating on running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. You can check them out on my channel. If you have any questions or comments about quarterbacks, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. I will try to answer as many as I can. And as the season goes along, on a week-by-week basis, how the show is going to work is that we will tell you guys that I'm buying and that I'm selling at every position throughout the season. So thank you guys. Stay tuned, and we'll get you on the other, and we'll see you on the flip side. Take care.